Welcome back to another episode of Free the Plant, Free the People, presented by BluRok Farms. I'm your host, LeVar Eady, and welcome to another episode. So let's get right into what we're going to be talking about today. And today is going to be cannabis and psilocybin, a symbiotic exploration. So before we get into the depths of this symbiotic exploration, let's talk about them two individually, separately. So let's go a little bit into the history of cannabis. Well, we know cannabis is a plant that has been used for its medical benefits as well as for its neurotropic benefits as well, or effects, what we call getting high. Those effects have been studied for, used for years and years and years. It's been a long part of the human history experience. And we know also that we as humans have an endocannabinoid system that has receptors that respond to cannabis, and that's how we enjoy the effects as well as can use the medical properties of it. The two main properties or two main cannabinoids that we do know about are that are most popular are THC, also known as tetrahydrocannabinol, and then you have CBD, which is cannabidiol. But most people just know it as CBD. Those are the two main properties or chemical properties that people associate with cannabis because of the effects that they provide. So now let's talk about a little of the symptoms or not symptoms, but illnesses that cannabis has been studied to have remedied or alleviating effects, such as chronic pain, epilepsy, anxiety, as well as nausea for cancer patients or cancer patients that are being treated with chemotherapy. So that's the cannabis side. Let's talk about the psilocybin, now we know, most people my hair is in my face. Most people don't really know that mushrooms are psilocybin, or they have the properties of psilocybin, rather, I should say. So they don't really have that connection to it, but it's just really a fancy word for mushrooms. So let's break that down. And because the reason why it's not synonymous with mushrooms because psilocybin can be found in other properties or other species as well as outside of the mushroom family, but we mostly know them from mushrooms or shrooms. And we know that also has been used for a very long period of time in religious and spiritual practices with indigenous people across the world in relation to using mushrooms and shrooms or psilocybin. We know that we do have receptors in the brain, that it binds with receptors in the brain, serotonin receptors specifically in the brain, and that's why you get that euphoric feel using certain as we call magic mushrooms, at times. And so the effects can be mind-altering experiences, hallucinations, revelations of self-consciousness, as well as there's more studies that are coming out recently that have shown that they can have, especially in microdoses, have an effect for helping with depression, PTSD, and certain addictions. So that's psilocybin and mushrooms or magic mushrooms. So those are the two main things that we're going to be talking about today. So now that we're moving on from understanding the broad aspects of what we're talking about, we're going to get a little bit more into detail of the specifics of how these two work together and work with us specifically. So as I mentioned, the cannabinoids can be accepted by the receptors in the endocannabinoid system, specifically CB1 and CB2. Those receptors, but there's many more receptors that have the ability to combine to it, but CB1 and CB2 are the main ones that we discuss and have research on, And we talked about the other aspects of THC giving the euphoric feeling, where the CBD does not have that. We've talked about that on other podcasts as well, so definitely check those episodes out. And so that's how it has an effect with the brain, as well as with pain sensation. We know sometimes when you smoke cannabis, depending on the strain and depending on the terpenes and the entourage effect, that forgetfulness or short-term memory loss is a component of it. Appetite suppression or stimulation, pain suppression is often, all of these are results of THC and CBD, as well as the other cannabinoids, which there's more than 100 different ones that we know about, probably even more than that we don't know about. Because you know what you know, and there's things you know that you know, there's things you don't know you know, and there's things you don't know you don't know. But anyways, so those THC and other cannabinoids bind with receptors in the brain, and so that's how you get these effects. So we know that about that. Now let's talk about psilocybin and how it has an effect and can combine to the brain. I briefly touched on how it primarily acts on serotonin receptors, but the particular exact receptor is 5-HT2A receptor, which can be found in the brain, and that's really what psilocybin is binding to and causing the stimulation of other things that give the effect that you get from ingesting psilocybin, magic mushrooms, shrooms. There's not as much research on psilocybin as we would hope or we would think because of the small amount of research that has been done has been promising in the areas that I mentioned earlier about with PTSD, depression, and addictions, that you would think that they would have fast-tracked a lot more research into those fields to explore really the full benefits that this substance, this chemical property can provide. And it's a natural property that's created through being cultivated. You can cultivate mushrooms, which we'll get into a little bit later. So that is the mechanism at which it affects the brain, and why it's a shame that they haven't done more research on it because of the promising research that we've seen in the little bit of studies that have been done in regards to microdosing. So that's psilocybin and the brain's interaction. And so as we can already see through what we've already discussed, that there is a common denominator with these two natural substances. And that's that it has natural receptors in the brain that bind to these and can produce effects. And many of those effects being medically beneficial. So now let's talk about my favorite subject and the segment that I've been waiting for, and that's about the cultivating synergy of it. So we know with growing cannabis that there's a couple of basic or limiting factors in the production of it. Light, sunlight, or light, artificial light, specific spectrum, a specific amount of photons that the plant needs to thrive. We know that. It also needs water. We know that's important. We know that it needs CO2 because it takes in CO2 and exhibits oxygen. That's why plants are very important for climate change, for our environment, because they provide, specifically trees, provide the most amount of oxygen for us. So we know that's another factor. So we can go into the rest of the factors, but we've talked about that in other episodes, but I want to stop right there at that part of CO2. So we know that the plants need CO2 in order to complete photosynthesis. That's a component into it that allows it to produce glucose, which allows that glucose to be used for the other components of the metabolism of the plant. So if we know that it needs CO2, if we can find things that can provide CO2, and that's why you'll see in a lot of grows, and especially commercial grows, they artificially pump in CO2 to speed up photosynthesis. There is a level at which adding more CO2 is not beneficial, and there's a level below it. So there is an optimal level of CO2 based on the space, amount of plants, the amount of air exchange. There's so many factors that go into that. That's why we have consulting. But that go into determining what would be the optimal for your environment. But there is an optimal amount. And so if you can add to that, if you know you're at a CO2 deficiency, to increase um, your other limiting factors like the light, your water, and all that is at its max, and the only limiting factor would be CO2. So if you increase CO2, that's going to increase photosynthesis. Increased photosynthesis increases yield production, increases growth if it's in the vegetative stage, so you get faster growth per day than you would if you don't. All those factors. So we know that if you, like I said, increase the CO2 levels, you can add to photosynthesis. Well, guess what? Mushrooms produce as their exchange CO2. So if you can create an environment that has the ability to have an optimal environment for the cultivation of mushrooms, as well as for the cultivation of cannabis, you can create a symbiotic relationship of that just alone, not counting anything else with the roots, the soil, anything else like that. Just the fact of them being in the same room together will enhance both. Because like I said, creating this ecosystem, the mushrooms are going to produce CO2. And if they're placed right, they're going to produce CO2 in a way that is going to be able to be absorbed by the leaves of the cannabis plant, and then be absorbed while the cannabis plant is releasing oxygen that the mushrooms are then absorbing and using. So therefore that it's like I said, a symbiotic relationship. You're creating that ecosystem where they're both feeding off of each other without taking anything away. There is no deficit. And again, that's just one aspect of growing those two together, as well as, like I said, with mushrooms, they create hyphae and a network under the root structure, under the soil structure that allows for better transportation of nutrients, soil, exchange, as well as water exchange, creating a better environment, providing a better environment for beneficial things like nematodes, which help against different pests and pathogens. A better environment for any other companion plants that you might be growing with your cannabis, if that is what you choose to do, if you're not using like a monoculture system. So again, these are just, again, quick and easy kind of ideas of ways of creating synergy with these two components. Eventually, I do want to have on this podcast, there's a couple of people I have in mind that we won't bring up yet, that I would love to have on, that are going to be able to give more in-depth into mushroom cultivation, because that is something that I'm newly, I've learned about how to grow mushrooms, and I've grown a couple of different kinds of mushrooms like lion's mane, pink oyster, and there was another one I can't think of right now that I grew. And I learned when I took this class at Magnolia, which is a dispensary in Oakland. They would have classes every Sunday, and part of my hood incubation cohort, that was one of the requirements, is that we would have to attend that class and complete the entire program. And in one of those programs, or one of those classes, actually, I take that back. He wasn't. I stayed after the class, and there was another class being taught after that, and it was, oh my God, I can't think of his name right now. My mind is running a blank. I remember his wife, because she just friended me on Facebook, Patricia Linaire and her husband. I can't think of his first name right now, but he is a great guy, really insightful, really, really smart. Had me out to his farm. He has a beautiful farm, beautiful land. He's building this beautiful structure on it for his family, and a beautiful family as well. Just really nice people that they grow cannabis, and he grows mushrooms. Mushrooms, it felt to me, is really his main passion. But he's the one that really was breaking down the benefits of being able to grow both together, as well as showed me how to inoculate spores, which was the point I was trying to get at to. I know I kind of rambled to get there, but we got there. So that's something that I'm getting back into. I want to learn more and develop that relationship of creating the best environment to produce both, potentially at a commercial scale, in great relation. And I know that's going to take some work, but there is some people, like I said, that I do want to get on that can get into more details about cultivating mushrooms on a commercial scale as well as on a home grow scale. And so that's for the sake of legality, we're talking about not magic mushrooms in that case. We're talking about just regular mushrooms that you can buy at the store, like lion's mane, shiitake, oyster. Because again, unless you live in a state that is legal to either consume or cultivate those magic mushrooms, we are not suggesting or condoning any actions that are unlawful. Um, so with that being said, we want to have them on for different episodes, and I want to kind of hedge what some of the things or some of those segments will be. One of them I want to be about the therapeutic potentials of combining both, using cannabis and microdosing mushrooms, and how that has, or if it has any beneficial, I don't know, outside of just some people's anecdotal evidence, but we want to get into the more scientific leaning side if there's any research being done on that that's substantial. Or if not, then just have the discussion with one of those guests about what we think that would look like, the formulation of that kind of experiment, and the potential results or what our hypothesis would be regarding those applications for medically applications with the combination of both or as them individually. Some of them we do already know in regards to cannabis and psilocybin and psychedelics, but we'll explore that in more detail, specifically on the psychedelic side, because we haven't explored that as much. And it's really interesting, while we're on that topic, I want to talk about just the legality of it, because that's going to be the other segment that I would want to touch on. And there's another person that I would love to talk to, and I believe we have him lined up for an interview later this year, where he was a component and helped write a bill that is being passed, or not being passed, let me rephrase that, that is being looked at and being reviewed in Congress in California, which is, I forgot the name of the bill, I'll have to look at it again, but it's talking about psychedelics and legalizing psychedelics, all psychedelics, and in with that frame and in with that bill, cannabis is listed on there as a psychedelic therapy component, which I thought was really interesting. And so I would love to talk to him about his thoughts on how that connection with psychedelics as its own versus what I'm saying in this episode here is cannabis is being separate than psilocybin and other psychedelics in that regard. So I think it would be interesting to get his opinion on it as well as others in regards to that. And then the legal, like I said, the legal component of it, of for those other states around the world and the country, what should we be looking at in regards to how the bills are being written, and how should we try to influence how those bills will be written in regards to cannabis and psychedelics, so that those other states might be able to avoid some of the hurdles that they've experienced in California, they've experienced in Oregon, so that, again, we can get these to the hands of people that might need it, but responsibly. Those are two segments that I definitely want to have other people talk about as well. And then the third one would be cultural impact and future trends. Where do we see this going? The hybridization of cannabis, the legalization of cannabis, the hybridization of mushrooms, and the combination of them, the commercialization of mushrooms, psychedelic mushrooms at that, and how that might change the path at which it's currently going, and will it be bad, positive or negative? What will those effects be? And seeing that. But again, I want to have some people that are a lot smarter than me in that particular subject to have on here to talk about that, and we'll get the feedback on that. I want to also hear your feedback on that. Tell us what you think about the legalization of psychedelics, psilocybin, mushrooms, your experience with this year of having cannabis be legalized, going on the second year, Um, what's your feelings on that? What things need to change? What things should be better? Your feelings about the dispensaries, the quality, the products, everything. Just let us know what you think, and we'll be glad to talk about it on the show. Um, Also, hit us up if you are interested to be on the show and you feel like you have something to share. Of course, all guests are vetted to make sure uh, that they really do have something to add to the show and they just don't want to be on it. We want to provide quality content for you guys, and we want you to have quality guests. And we love your suggestions, and let us know. So I've been talking for a long time, but I want to say thank you again for tuning in for another episode of Free the Plant, Free the People. My name is LeVar Eady, and this episode is presented by BluRok Farms. Definitely check them out, BluRokFarm.com. And also, if you need your medical cannabis card renewed or you need to get one, check out leafwell.com and use the code BluRokFarm10 to get $10 off, depending on your state, or depending on the time, or 10% off. So yeah, again, that code is BluRok Farm 10. That's BLUROKFARM 10. So again, thank you again for listening. Definitely subscribe to our YouTube page, Free the Plant, Free the People. All episodes will be up on there, but they will be up on here first. So I want to say thank you again to Studio 519 for helping me with this podcast, helping me produce it. And, as we say all the time, we just want to give you knowledge from a scientific perspective, as well as in a way that the people can digest. So like I tell my stepkids all the time, I'm just putting this information out like smoke. If you inhale, you inhale. If you don't, you don't. It's all good either way. I'm going to be good. So remember, knowledge sets you free. And if we free the plant, we'll free the people. We out.